All right, so yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Moral Economy. This is episode number. What is it, guys?
Six.
Six.
Of season
Six.
two.
Six.
Season two.
Oh wait, you guys did one before.
That was this one. We're doing it now.
Yeah, we're doing it now.
Okay.
After a hiatus of about a month and a half, we're back. Yeah, good news.
I'm one of your hosts, Eddie.
I'm Navaz, one of the other hosts.
I'm Monkey's uncle. My name's Chal.
I'm your other host, Frat.
I'm Chel's uncle, so Andrew.
I'm just a
Monkey's
humble
great
guest
uncle.
for now.
And a humble guest.
New member.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
tonight's agenda is just some of the things that we've been trying to catch up. One of them was the leaks that came out of a whistleblower from a Panama-based law firm that was allegedly involved in a lot of money laundering for the global capitalist elite, and and what that means. Let's say, to put it very briefly. So you've probably all heard about it, read about it.
Yeah, because it happened the day before I left for Brazil.
It's almost been a month and a half now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we did this before. We somehow forgot to record it, so which is why we're doing it again. Yeah.
But what's interesting, it came out a month and a half ago, but it's kind of fell off. It's
It
fallen
did
off
fall
of the
the radar,
headlines,
so it's
right?
good to talk about it.
And
Yeah.
it's such an important issue.
Yeah.
But I think a few days ago, the whistleblower actually has come out with a statement as well, and sort of revealing their intentions at doing this. But again, deep down in the soul, when you dissect this whole problem, what you realize is that it's shocking, right? First, intuitive reaction that ordinary people like me, who had on hearing about this, listening about this, reading about this was, oh my God, is this really happening? But then, when you think about it, when you reflect on it, you kind of realize that, you knew this was happening, right? So what's this whole moral outrage about? Because, as it appears to be, this was something that is there, and as you probably know, a lot of countries do it. As in, a lot of economies are based on this sort of shady business, let's say.
How much money was it in total? That they
It's
found?
trillions of dollars.
Is it three?
Probably, yeah.
Is it three or four?
I don't know if they've quantified it, but because it was such a huge leak, what's mostly been extracted out of it involves trillions of dollars.
Yeah,
Of course,
The
it
value
involves,
is calculated in trillions.
yeah, it is
Well,
within
that-
trillions of
that
dollars,
changes
and
my-
yeah,
And to emphasize, this is the largest data leak in world
and
history.
exactly that is what I was about to talk about. That it is the biggest data leak ever to have happened. But from all this, we know that there's more than 200,000 companies, offshore companies, involved in this sort of business, and there's predominant. Predominant is probably the wrong word. There's a well represented, cross section of the world's elite involved in it, all the way from showbiz people to politicians to moneyed people, and from all parts of the world. Right? There's the Iranians, there's the Russians, there's the Scandinavians. Let's say if
Are
Iceland
there double
qualifies.
companies, or do some people possess more than one company?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is how it works.
Is that just because this is just one? I mean, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
this
no
is
worries.
just one company right now. That's
One of the many firms that provides these services.
That
Yeah,
provides these services, and it's 200,000.
the companies that it has been dealing with.
right?
Yeah,
And so we
yeah.
could probably calculate. Basically, that's the 1%. Or so.
Yeah, it is.
Point
But
zero.
then
Not. No, I mean if we figure out all the other companies that are doing it too.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
we have no idea about it. That's the
Yeah.
thing. The extent of it's being pervasive within the system comes from the fact that there are countries that we even don't talk about. They're just public knowledge that they do this kind of stuff. Hong Kong, Switzerland, I don't know, Monaco, the Canary Islands, all this kind of stuff.
Delaware.
There's
Delaware,
states in the
Yeah.
US as well. But
Florida.
what I really want to talk about the disturbing part that I think this all holds for all of us is that this sort of what I was thinking about, that if you're an ordinary working class person, there is such a moral exuberation, such a sort of, there's this coercive apparatus on you to pay your taxes and, be good about it.
Yeah.
It's such fulfilling your whatever citizenship duties, let's say, in the Republican tradition. This is the primary citizenship duty that a citizen has towards the community, namely paying your taxes. But then if you're rich enough, if you're wealthy enough, there's all these companies like the Mossack Fonesca, that provide these services for you to evade to avoid taxes. Sorry, that's where the legal distinction lies. That evasion is the crime and avoidance is perfectly legal. It's perfectly legit.
Right.
You can do it. But what makes it also troubling is most of these people are involved in this. They're basically a lot of them. I think majority of them, based on what we know about them, are public officials, are politicians, and which is why this has come out with all this moral outrage against this leak. The Icelandic Prime Minister, British Premier, Vladimir
His father,
Putin,
Messi.
the monarchy in Saudi Arabia, for example. But what this does not question, what this sort of thing is, what's missing from all this is the absence of the real, people that matter, the big money, the big corporate interests, who actually do this sort of a thing within the purview of everyday activities of the world economy, transfer pricing, offshore locations, incorporating companies in tax heavens, like whatever, British Virgin Islands, Canary Islands, all that. Nobody's questioning that. People are just talking about, Panama leaks and they're, shaming and blaming the political elite. Of course, there is the moral outrage that would come out from a public official benefiting from their public positions and stashing this amount of wealth and not paying taxes, because that is what they're supposed to do in the first place as the prime minister, as the political leadership of a country. They're the ones that demand us to pay taxes, and they're the ones they should be paying taxes as well. But this is where the problem lies. The class division within the system, right? So if you're an ordinary citizen going about your life, doing whatever 9 to 5 that you're doing, you just cannot avoid taxes, right? Taxes are a fact of the world for you. You just cannot avoid that. Only until, you make a certain amount of money and then you can do this sort of stuff. So that is, I think, where the real injustice of this thing lies.
Exactly, and that was justified in the financial crisis that these banks are too big to fail, so we cannot do anything about it. It's the same thing, you cannot tax the large corporations because they are too big and they can go somewhere else. We cannot do anything about it. It's a free world. But if Eddie doesn't pay his taxes, fuck him, put him to jail. What's gonna happen?
Eddie's gonna go to jail.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The same thing with the GZ in Germany.
Yeah, I've got the first threatening mail from them saying
Can you guys explain what
GZ is? Oh yeah, I guess we should explain that. It's not called GZ anymore, but I forgot what it's called.
€17.5 per month, right?
Yeah, and you pay in
it is
Germany.
mandatory-
In Germany,
mandatory
you pay
contribution.
every household pays €17.5 per month for television and radio.
They assume you have it because
And they
you can't say. You could say before that you
Yeah.
don't have a TV,
Yeah.
but since a couple of years ago they said any electronic device in your home can be considered, and then everybody has to pay.
Yeah.
They don't ask you anymore.
And now it doesn't matter if the household is just one person living alone and maybe a bit poor, or if it's 4 people living in a huge house. They all pay the same thing, which is then not really equal.
$20 a year.
But it's not really equal. I don't really care about the amount, actually. I would gladly pay for, good quality, service, which I love Deutschlandfunk, actually. But it's just unequal in that sense, but we cannot not pay it. Whereas for a rich person, it doesn't matter to
You call
them.
it a regressive tax.
It's a regressive tax.
Yeah.
I am glad that you pointed this out. The whole debate about this notion of KZ, of this sort of taxation, is very closely linked. I mean, one of the primary reasons, if we take this example of KZ, the mandatory tax for broadcasting services that every citizen has to pay.
So it's not technically
Comes-
a tax. It's technically something
but
else.
but it's a mandatory contribution that you have to do to public broadcasting services
That's right.
at its basic level.
Yeah.
And where does this moral force of this thing come from? It comes from a resolution. It comes from a law that was passed by the Senate of the city of Hamburg, which is why you cannot go against it. So this brings us back to this notion of, the whole taxation thing. This sort of scheme is justified. All these kind of schemes are justified in the name of democracy, in the scheme of, representation, right? Now, what's happening is that when this is being justified for ordinary people like us, for the elite, there is no justification. They do not require a justification to take their money elsewhere, right?
But do you think they are connected? Because I don't see the connection between these two things, like the capitalism as its own that you criticize, we criticize, and this fact about the service fee that you have to pay per month. Because I don't think if there is any correlation between them. There is a kind of weak, I would say, ill-prepared regulation that will supposedly be improved during the next couple of years. Like many laws and regulations have been improved. They weren't perfect at the beginning and then they were improved. So that thing, like 17 and a half months, definitely it becomes an issue and then they address it in the parliament and Bundestag or whatever. Then they would say they can come up with some kind of better plan that would say you pay per person, it's not per apartment, for example, or you pay a percentage of your income. That would be fair. So your percentage might be €3, another percentage might be 300, depending on your income. So that it could improve. So I don't see the very idea of capitalism in its own and the things that it has doesn't have much to do with this very case, which is just a bad regulation, I think.
Yeah, you're very right. I think you put it out there well. But what I was trying to get at is the sort of legitimacy that this sort of a scheme gives to the system. You do not question capitalism because it offers you the promise of democracy, of human rights, which is why this sort of perversion, is allowed to run in the system. And there is a fine line that draws it. That's what I was talking about, that, you can avoid taxes. That is perfectly legal, right? You can, but there is this notion of tax evasion. And in this sense, this sort of a coercive structure that is being imposed on people in the name that, they are participating in a democracy, right? And by choosing these representatives to the Senate who maybe pass this law, they could very well pass some more regressive laws, right? Which is why this comes down to the notion of the tyranny of the majority. But then what I was trying to hint at is this sort of a legitimacy that such a scheme provides to the system, insofar as you're being represented, insofar as you have a voice through your representatives. You cannot question the system in whatever provisions that the system, imposes on you. That is what I think is relevant to the discussion in its larger logic. You do not question the scheme. Nobody is questioning the system. None of the critiques that have come out have questioned the capitalist system as such, based on the sort of financial pornography, as Zizek called it, because the system provides you with an opportunity to change these people. The Icelandic prime minister was
Removed.
pressured to step out. A Spanish minister, I've heard, has resigned. There've been inquiries in a lot of countries, even in Germany. We were talking about.
Isn't that because of the democracy?
Absolutely,
That
which
is
is
the very idea
that
of
is the
democracy.
facade. That
If
is
something becomes an issue that is important to the majority of people, it will be addressed. The problem we have been having, I think, until now, where the wrong issues were being addressed. It's like the same as in the US, what Bernie Sanders is saying. It's like that what you're addressing are the wrong issues. And if he doesn't get the majority of the votes, that means the majority of people still don't consider those issues as significant.
That is exactly what I'm saying. So this somehow system legitimizes this system.
Yeah.
The 17.5 euros that go out of your pocket are significant for you, but you're not accounting for the millions of dollars or euros of taxes that could have accrued had this money remained within this tax jurisdiction, right? Because that is a foregone sort of an accounting technique that we do not use in our daily lives. What matters for us, in this example that we were talking about, is the 17.5 euros that you have to, or I have to pay out of my pocket, right? And this is significant for me, which is why this hurts me. And I think, we should do something about it. There's been signature campaigns, there have been petitions, all that kind of stuff. But this sort of a thing, the larger systemic perversion, is something that does not affect us. It does affect us, but we do not realize how it affects us. Insofar as these taxes were never accrued, they were never taken, or they were not stolen in the legal sense, right?
You mean Panama Papers?
Yeah, the Panama Papers, the perversion that exists in the system that I was talking about. We do not question that. We think, oh, well, it's their money, they could do anything with it, And the fact that this sort of a thing exists, and we know about it, everybody knows about it, it's a part of the, let's say, the scheme of how things are. We do not question it. But this is precisely why we need to question it. That you're being told that, if it's a problem, you go.
Exactly the things that we see really real.
And this is why it matters, because, like I said, if you don't pay your taxes, the tax police will hunt you. The IRS, the Finanzamt, whatever you have, that's going to hunt you. You do not simply have the luxury of having a law firm in Panama and taking care of your finances, because you do not have that much money. But these people who have this much money, they have the privilege of doing this thing, right? And if democracy does provide the moral equality that it promises us, right, then it should be taking care of these people, or it should be dealing with these people in the same way it does with an ordinary citizen who's cheating on his taxes. But precisely this is the internal logic of the system that it does not work on. If you're rich enough, there's so many possibilities for you to do. You could just take your money to Switzerland, nobody's going to ask you nothing. You could take it to, I don't know, Monaco, Hong Kong. You could take it to Panama. You could take it anywhere.
And a regular person just can't.
And this is what most standard critiques of the system don't do. They do not criticize the system as a whole. That by promising human rights, by promising democracy, by promising freedom, whatever that means, you have your own space to live in. But no, that's not true, because there's this injustice that is going on, right? Injustice in the sense that equals are not being treated as equals. Well, if I am an equal citizen and another millionaire or billionaire is an equal citizen, we should be subject to the same sort of laws. Yeah. And this sort of
that's not true.
Duplicity should not exist.
It's very interesting. Like listening to liberal economists or liberal academics talking about, for instance, voting with your feet.
Which is right? Exactly
Which
this
is
serves
exactly
as
what you're talking about. Because rich people can vote with their feet.
Yeah, they can take away their money from them.
And
capital flight.
Yeah.
And
but it's called voting with your feet.
Yeah.
It's like saying, I don't like it here, so I'm going to go over there where I like it more. And
that underscores any kind of debate that the government has with big corporations and very wealthy people.
Yeah.
It's capital flight.
Yeah.
So that shows a limit, if anything, of the capitalist system, right?
Yeah. That you cannot question the logic of capital. Again, if you read about what right liberals are saying about this, they're saying, oh well, this was a result of the welfare state. Because you were putting all these people under excessive taxes, they found somewhere else to take their money with. But then it's a bigger question. Taxes are not just about equality of people. Taxes are about contributing your due to the society. As I said, these people who are cheating on their taxes, they are implicit in this moral crime. Moral because they're using the resources of the society that they earn this money from.
But there's one thing not clear for me, because I think this tax evasion scheme
it's tax avoidance.
as not something that is inherent to capitalism or that capitalism created, but I see it more a lack of a global system for taxation. So it is like what you say, capitalism is basically within the region of capitalism, like the US, like Europe or whatever. But if you say globally, and you have Africa and South America and everything, and then you don't have a mechanism, like you have the UN Council, but you don't have mechanism to force countries to do something for a better good in globally. And as long as you can't enforce that in a global way, there is always loopholes and holes that people would take advantage
part
of.
The loopholes, that is actually an excellent point to bring up, because eventually if everyone starts fleeing, then maybe the other countries then are going to have more harder taxes, and then where they're going to flee to. Eventually the whole world may not have to flee. There might be nowhere to flee to, right? Yeah. But the thing, one problem with this idea is that let's take the New Deal, for instance, in the United States. You wanted to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, okay. Take the New Deal in the United States, which just happened after the Great Depression. Roosevelt, said basically said to rich people, look, here's a bunch of revolutionaries. Well, there's a bunch of revolutionaries who want to have your heads, basically, cut a deal with us and to help, make their lives better so that we can also save capitalism at the same time. And what ended up happening is, of course, they did it because it saved their heads. And we had, after the, World War II, we had the most progressive taxes we've ever had, 90% for certain millionaires. And because they had the money, however, they were able to just keep on working at it with lobbying, with campaigns, and getting every tax repealed, and buying politicians, getting regulations repealed, and that's capital itself. Capital works to save itself, even if it's not an organized effort.
And actually, I wanted to say the same thing. And I guess what I'll just add to it now is that for me, the punchline is that sure, globally, they could always run, but within the capitalist system, and this is what I hear you saying, there are mechanisms through our democracy to slow it down. But as Andrew just pointed out, historically we have slowed it down. The problem is that capitalism can only slow it down. It can't eliminate it.
Yeah. As long as we keep the system in place, we
Right.
can only slow it down.
We can appeal Citizens United, sure, because Citizens United now in the U.S., for example, allows an unlimited amount of money to go to any kind of politician. It could literally buy politicians. We can put restrictions on capital flight. We can take bankers to jail. But that's now. What's going to happen tomorrow? And that's the problem, I think, at least I have, with the capitalist economic system.
Like we're constantly being put on our toes, trying to correct the things that capitalists are doing, and if we just didn't have the system, then we wouldn't have to keep on doing that. You mentioned, for instance, okay, who cares, or you don't see the connection between the 1750 and capitalism. And what I would say to that is, one, it was just an example because it happened to me, but also, if I want to fight it from my moral standpoint, like I said, I don't care about 1750. I can pay that a month. But from a moral standpoint, I see that I shouldn't have to do that, and that other poor people shouldn't have to do that when rich people can do it really easily and it doesn't hurt them at all. But if I don't do it, the government now has much stronger recourse to.
But you're not consider the third option that could.
The third option is to pursue the change.
Exactly.
Yeah, but what happens up until that point? Do I get what? Yeah, I know, but what happens up to that point? I mean, that could take years. That could be a very long process of us having to pay, what to me is an unfair amount over years and years. And the thing with this law is that they've made it so that most people are like, well, I would much rather do the 1750 a month than have to go through this legal process. And it doesn't occur to them also that, hey, there's lots of other people that's come together. This problem of organization. And that's actually what our whole problem is that we actually have to become organized on a much more massive scale.
They actually had it on this skill set. They had this collective effort for
Lots of
fighting
people,
it.
they have a collective effort for fighting it legally. They still have it, but again, once they set this law, which just came in this year, lots of people just started deciding to pay it instead. They lost a lot of the base of support for that, and it could take years and years again to build up that base. And why should we have to do that in the first place?
But again, this all points out that if you seek a recourse within the system and you're provided that recourse, that goes on to legitimize the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is precisely the problem. Pujan earlier mentioned about the capacity of enforcement. I don't think it's really a matter of enforcement. How do you enforce taxes on a global level? You don't have to enforce taxes on a global level. What you have to ensure is that resources consumed from a certain society are returned to that society by way of tax. Taxation is a way of doing that. If a certain corporation, if a certain company, if a certain wealthy person is making his money out of consuming social resources from a society, this is a moral imperative that he or she pays taxes to that society. The point is that even at the lack of enforcement on a global level, right? What's happening is that the internal logic of the system is that, if you repress capital over here, capital will find always somewhere else to go. There's always Panama, Canary Islands. This is the sort of a race to the bottom sort of a thing, all these companies.
I'm
all these
actually
countries, yeah.
quite sympathetic with Pujan's point of view to a
Yeah.
degree. I mean, sometimes, on a theoretical level, I wonder if we were to accomplish some kind of mass movement, we would nevertheless need a kind of legal structure. I mean, there's far too many people. Okay, I mean,
A bureaucracy.
But I mean, at some point, you need to say this kind of behavior is not allowed, because if we just all it takes is, as we see right now happening, a tiny percentage of people to engage in this behavior, and if there ever exists the possibility for that to be engaged in, then they will engage in it, right?
Yeah.
And even if we were to envision some kind of utopian society, there's probably going to be some tiny minority of black market capitalists out there who've nevertheless managed to amass a huge amount of wealth, right? And they'll still continue to do things like this to extract from the system. And I mean, okay, so maybe this is getting a
But
little
what's
bit
wrong with
too
saying
far.
that?
Yeah.
That's bad.
But
Yeah, but
that's what I'm
also,
saying.
why not just have a legal structure?
That is exactly what that is one of
we
that is
have the
one of
chance
ways
now
out of
with
it.
the Panama
Yeah.
Papers. We can create new laws and have people investigated. I mean, not even new laws, man. I mean, okay,
Existing laws, if they're better enforced, like there exist double taxation treaties. There exist all these investment treaties that countries have among themselves.
Yeah.
That avoids the incidence of double taxation
Yeah.
within companies registered in their jurisdictions,
Yeah.
right? And it's not a matter of that's the traditional problem of capitalism, right? Capitalists, being small in number, are easier to organize as compared to other classes within the society.
Yeah.
That is probably, as long as
I-
there's going to be capital, this problem's going to be there.
Yeah.
But the point is that this sort of a duplicity of the system, right?
Yeah.
This is where the whole moral outrage, I think, comes out from.
Yeah.
This sort of a thing is
Yeah.
accepted. Nobody's questioning it on its acceptability within the justification provided in the system, which is a recourse to law, which is a recourse to institutions of democracy.
Yeah.
You cannot go to a court and say, "Oh, this was bad," right?
Yeah.
This was bad, because you do not have the legal authority to challenge this, because it's a permitted practice.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well,
Despite its
I imagine that as soon as these Panama Papers were released, lawyers all over the world said, "Oh, payday."
this was a law. This
You
was a
know,
law
I mean,
firm that
you
was
know.
doing this, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
lawyers are one of the demographics that are extremely happy about the Panama
As
Papers becoming public
that
because
joke as well,
yeah.
what's the how are sperm and lawyers the same? One in every million becomes a human being.
Well, there are literally hundreds of millions of lawyers. So,
That is true, but-
so we're good, guys.
But again, that's what I'm saying. This is exactly what I was trying to get out of this. That this sort of a systematic perversion is allowed to exist and perpetuate
Yeah.
in the name of certain institutions that we all feel good about. Democracy, we all feel good about it. Human rights, we all feel good about it. We don't want to challenge the system because it promises us equality,
Right.
because it promises democracy.
And what I hear you saying, I think we could piggyback off of it, because we've just been speaking so much about it,
Yeah.
is what I wanted to talk about.
Oh, before
ahead,
you
yeah.
talk about it, I do have like a little response. If you're going to
Okay,
go into
well,
a lot,
No, but it's okay.
It's probably the same thing.
It's
He's going to
really-
take on
it's
the
really
same
short.
trail.
It's
Yeah.
really short. What I think is like I draw a parallel to for instance, last year, same-sex marriage was made legal by the Supreme Court
In the United States.
in the United States.
Yeah.
Right,
America,
sorry,
American century.
American centrism. And for me, it was like I'm glad they pursued that in the court. Even if I don't believe that we should have this system, I'm still glad we pursued it the entire time. Guys, I'm talking to you guys.
I'm listening.
You are
I'm
talking to
listening.
us.
I'm listening.
Yeah, this is supposed to be us
I'm
talking to
glad
each
they
other.
pursued that. So I'm to a certain extent, I support it when you go and pursue these legal options. I don't see a reason
It
not
doesn't have to be.
Yeah, but
legal
again,
options,
I-
it could be
I sta-
regulatory
you know,
options.
I-
You go and amend the regulations.
Yeah,
You
but
don't have
I-
to take
this-
it
I
to
think
me,
I'm going to sum this up. I think this is how we allow the system to perpetuate, insofar as it allows us our institutions of democracy and our freedom. And Eddie wants to talk about freedom.
Yeah, I mean, both free. I mean, it's along the same lines of everything we've already spoken about. But it makes me think what you just said, Andrew, makes me think about the debate that a lot of people in the Democratic Party are having now between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. They're saying, Bernie fans, we know you feel the burn, but it's time that you jump on the Hillary bandwagon because this is still much better than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And we can still get these small legal gains because if someone like Trump comes in, which is going to go so far back. And what I want to say, I mean, I'm on the fence because I see a problem. I see a systemic problem with Clinton, and I think she was as well Bernie. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys see that kind of connection?
Did you listen to Nader on Democracy Now?
Yeah, I did.
Or was it Democracy Now?
It was
Democracy Now, right? It was great. He said the exact thing. It's like these people are not voting not for Hillary because whatever reason, because they see a better alternative. It's because they actually don't like Hillary and they actually like Bernie. So why should they vote for Hillary in the end if she becomes the candidate? There's no reason.
Isn't it a possibility that Bernie would run anyway as an independent?
Probably
I
not.
doubt it very much.
Probably not.
I don't think he wants to.
He might contest the convention if Hillary if she doesn't clinch the required delegates. But she looks pretty damn close. I think she's at 2,100 now. Actually,
I mean, as soon as
she's at 2,151 now. She needs 2,383.
Yeah. As soon as she gets over that with the super delegates,
even without it, I think she's there.
There's a good chance that she won't get there without it.
Then the convention can be contested.
But I think as soon as she gets it with the super delegates, the media will be like, okay, it's over. I mean, they're already like that anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody's
but,
just,
I mean,
it's like a foregone conclusion out there.
Which is another, thing that I guess we're trying to do here with the moral economy, trying to provide a different kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even want to vote, any of us, right? I mean, jeez.
Yeah.
I can't even.
Voting legitimizes the system,
Don't vote. We spoke about this. Don't vote. Shell spoke about this. Don't vote.
It does legitimize the system. And that, I think, is where it takes me to briefly what I wanted to talk about is how the system, capitalism, as we understand it today, isn't compatible with freedom and democracy. And this is a paper which you could find on Jacobin magazine online. Great online magazine. Check it out. Great stuff on it. And they had a paper, it was called Capitalism and Freedom. And it's really underscoring a lot of our talk with the Panama Papers. Pretty much, the point is that there are many instances where we see that systemically, capitalism is anathema to what we think is so valuable, freedom and democracy. A lot of us are philosophers here. I'm not going to get into freedom and democracy. Maybe Andrew did you want to say something, actually?
I mean, I could go into it after you were...
Okay, but briefly, let's just say it's the divide that some thinkers want to make between the public sphere and the private sphere. Loosely speaking, public, anything, or rather, private, anything that concerns you and it doesn't affect anyone else. Public, anything that you do that does concern other people, that affects other people. Yeah. And we actually, speaking about the Panama Papers, touched on, I think, at least 3 different ways where we see that capitalism just infringes upon our notions of freedom and democracy. So we spoke about, so this article speaks about 5. I think we already spoke about
3 of them.
3 of them, yeah. One of them, I said that already. One of them is the idea that, the difference between a poor person and a wealthy person. If you're a poor person, if you don't work, you starve.
Totally.
Yeah, a rich person doesn't, have to concern himself about that, right? Why? Because capitalism is a natural system it's an economic system which accumulates wealth. It naturally creates inequality. Yeah. Another thing is that capitalists, we already spoke about this as well, capital flight, right? Any kind of discourse that you have between politicians, your representatives that we in a democracy vote for, when they meet with capitalist enterprise, they have to be careful in how much they push. because
The apple's a little loud. Maybe save the
That's
apple.
fine, man. Just eat the apple.
yes, it's
No,
all right.
man, just
An apple a day keeps the doctor away.
I'm having the
After the
munchies.
day you die anyway.
You You see, we're not only a podcast that analyzes politics, we also
eat
give
apples.
health
Yeah,
tips.
yeah.
Totally.
Medical.
Medical as
We're the
well.
last people to be giving health tips.
Yeah, so capital flight, the threat of
What is capital flight? Like,
Capital flight pretty much is that, and I mean it within the context of, if I'm a politician, you're a very powerful businessman, and I tell you, look, you have to pay more taxes, you as the businessman could easily say, look, if you push legislation that will require me to pay more taxes, I will take my business somewhere else.
okay.
And this, you, politician, is going to affect your economy.
Flight from fleeing.
Yeah.
I was thinking flight, and I was thinking of flying. I was like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
flight
that's flying.
as in
Is that
you will
over
take
there?
a flight,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay.
Capital takes flight.
Fly away.
They also have another threat that capitalists can use, and that is this de-investment. They
Mhm.
say, I'm not going to continue, giving money to these universities, for example, which wouldn't be a bad idea because they influence them. Anyways,
Yeah.
another thing, sorry?
Go ahead.
We'll keep going. Another thing is something that we hear with Wolf a lot. We spend most of our times at work. Although we value democracy very much so, we think this is a great principle. Most of our times we're in undemocratic areas. A business is structured to be autocratic, right? It's structured to be tyrannical, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem. One last thing is we also spoke about elites control the political system, and in the U.S. this is very poignant with Citizens United. Corporations considered persons can give as much money as they want to a political party, and that just throws off any conception that we have of democracy. And so these kind of things, if we look at it historically, Andrew mentioned this with the 20s, with FDR, we pushed taxes after $200,000 to be at 100%. If you made a lot of money, you still have to pay 90% taxes. But we see all these things got rolled back. They're now attacking Medicare. They're attacking Social Security,
Pensions. Right?
pensions.
Yeah.
All these things that were won, they're being slowly rolled back. And sure, we could play the game. We could play the game. Oh, we mobilize and we get all these rights again. We get all these things that we consider to be true and fair. But then what ends up happening? They roll it back. And now I think it's even more pervasive because big money has figured out how to use media, how to use propaganda. And it's so powerful that you get a bunch of guys like us doing this podcast, as insignificant as it may seem compared to the CNNs and the ABCs of the world. But we're trying to do it because we see how pervasive it is, right? And that's fucked up because it is, the capitalist logic is ubiquitous. I mean, it is everywhere. It is how we understand the world. We commodify everything. We were just speaking about it, I think, before the podcast. They've even commodified relationships, cuddling and talking to people.
Yeah, in Japan, going to pay to talk to
Yeah.
people and to
And so that for me, it is for that reason that it is clear that we should not legitimize the system. We should try in every which way to fight it. We should consider it a long-term investment, and all for the aim of reaching more democracy and more freedom.
Yeah. And keep in mind, the system that we're talking about here is the capitalist system, yeah? And insofar as we're also offering a critique of democracy, it's only because they're so closely related at the present in our world, you
Right.
know, because they're
the concept of democracy nowadays.
exactly.
Yeah.
The two have formed some sort of extremely tight symbiotic relationship, and
discourse.
and it seems that they cannot be sort of pulled apart. However, we're not criticizing the idea of democracy.
No.
We want more democracy,
Yeah,
democracy,
that's the problem.
authentic democracy, not democracy that's already been subverted by a
Yeah, not the
capitalist
democracy that
system.
they're trying to bring to Iraq. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Not that democracy, or
But I'm not so sure. I mean, again, I would have the dissenting view over here in the sense that what just Shell said.
Hmm.
I think capitalism is much more pervasive than democracy itself. You know,
Mhm.
you have China is the greatest example that you could have. It's a functioning capitalist economy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You could
Totally.
criticize it. You could totally criticize it
Yeah.
on what democracy is and what capitalism is,
Yeah.
and it's not democracy. You could criticize it being
Yeah.
capitalist as well, but it doesn't really matter.
Oh,
Hold on, but
that's
I
not-
hear him
don't
saying
see that
something
dissenting
else.
at all. Though.
I hear because I hear him saying something else and him reading something else.
Okay.
What I hear him saying is that in public discourse in the West today, we've associated so much capitalism and democracy that if we criticize capitalism like we're doing now, it seems as if we're criticizing democracy.
Democracy. Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought he was talking about the correlation, the connection that they have. That capitalism would survive in a democracy, and a democracy would survive inherently in a capitalist environment.
Right.
This is what
The capitalists use our democracy to
Yeah, but that is-
perpetuate
no,
themselves.
that
you
is
know,
what-
but they also can use other systems. I mean,
Totally. China.
which shows that it's not a necessary connection. I think.
No, but this is-
I think
this
that's
is-
what that shows.
No, but this is the argument, like again, if you would ask a socialist, back in the day, that the Soviet Union was not a socialist state. It was essentially a bureaucratic state run by
A
bureaucracy,
state,
right?
State
Yeah.
capitalist state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that's the thing, insofar as what values you assign to a particular ideology, to a particular system, right?
Yeah.
That is this is how the logic's been, prevailing. That for capitalism you require democracy. For democracy you require capitalism. But what we see in
China.
Chinese
Yeah,
example,
it's the
in at
opposite.
least China, we have other examples as well. I could name Saudi Arabia. I could name tons of other countries, which we can always question on their democratic credentials.
Absolutely,
But they're totally built in within the capitalist logic.
Yeah.
So this is not really a necessary connection. Democracy could survive without
Absolutely. Yeah.
capitalism being
yeah.
in vogue, and
Yeah.
capitalism,
And-
I suppose,
Yeah.
survives
Yeah.
without democracy being there.
Yeah.
As much as Fukuyama would want us to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is,
Didn't
That's
he?
right,
Didn't
that's
he
right,
rescind
yeah.
his statement?
Yeah.
I don't think
the
so.
end of history? No, I think he did.
He did.
Did he?
Yeah, he
Okay.
did.
Yeah, he did.
Well, then I did not read it.
Recently.
Yeah, it didn't become popular. Why? Well,
Yeah, because we all know why.
yeah, exactly.
In your presentation, Eddie, I think there's also the implication that democracy can work as some sort of as something that can stand against or prevent stand against capitalism. So democracy,
Absolutely.
so democracy is also the potential to undermine capitalism.
Totally,
Even a democracy. Well, I don't know, but then there's the question: what about the American democracy as it is now? Does this democracy have the potential to
But
undermine capitalism,
I don't
or is
call
this
that a
democracy? Yeah, well, absolutely. Or is this democracy already so subverted by capitalism that the easiest way would be to just start anew with the American Revolution?
I think one of the problems that we face in our contemporary society is that some of these words that we use, democracy, capitalism, they've been used so often enough that we've probably lost track of what they actually mean.
That's a good point.
See that over here, we were just talking earlier about democratic confederalism, and it's a system that claims to be democratic at its basics, at its best, but has nothing to do with capitalism at all. So, but again, coming back to the thing, that our vocabularies are so limited in expressing some of the ideas that we want to. Even, people like us, when we're talking about something very emancipatory, from a democratic point of view, very emancipatory, we still have to use the word democracy because we have no other word for it. Yeah. So I think
I wanted to reference Chomsky for a second because he just had this new documentary that came out recently. I forget the title, but he makes a good point about how, like, nowadays, with neoliberalism, which, as he puts, which I love, it's not liberal nor neo, it's not new. It pushes back democracy as much as possible, and that's really interesting because if you look at what Aristotle would say in politics, first guy to write about democracy that we know of, if I'm not mistaken, he would say, look, naturally in the democracies there are inequalities. But how you would solve that is by reducing inequalities as much as possible. On the other hand, what we found with neoliberalism is the exact opposite. Is that inequalities are more and more increased. And that's really shitty.
Because it's the only way to drive growth.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is, again, if you're comparing this the Athenian democracy with the contemporary democracy that you see, is the absence of an economic system. In Athens, they had slaves to work for them, right? Yeah. Which is outrageous if we talk about it today. But that just goes on to say that democracy is an ideal, is not dependent on a particular economic system.
We always
democracy can exist in the Athenian form without being liberal democracy.
We have to always distinguish between democracy as sort of the system that we have, and the democracy as an idea, and also as a way of interacting with people.
I think this is one of those things that I think Badiou, for example, very famously put about socialism. He said, just because the Soviet Union failed, does not mean that socialism as an idea has failed.
Right.
So that sort of is
although that's what the capitalist propaganda
exactly that is what it was about. It's all failing. China, for example, has undergone major transformations, but its political structure is way too far from being democratic, right? So this just goes on to say what the discipline that we assume or that we presume underpins our discussions when we talk of terms like democracy doesn't really exist. Democracy as a term is so broad; it has so many meanings now that discipline that we sort of intend does not communicate itself.
If I may, because we're also running on time, but if I may, last word, then we need to start taking back words like
democracy.
This. We need to actually start a movement, a campaign, whatever, to take back words like democracy, like communism, like freedom, socialism,
and also
feminism,
clarify capitalism. What is it?
Yeah, and clarify capitalism as well. Understood what capitalism was, when socialists were talking about it, and make people understand that.
One thing I think also we should add, which is actually just adding to what you're saying, is really make this distinction, because it is so powerful nowadays that democracy doesn't have to mean capitalism.
Yeah,
that is such a fallacy.
Yeah,
if anything, it's anathema to it. And I think we should.
Yeah, we're going to link an article. I read a really good article about this. That how democracy, in the Athenian sense, is not the same democracy we have today, and how they're both equally democratic.
I mean,
we could tag that article. That's a good read. You should all read that. Yeah.
What's it called? Do you know the author?
It's called "Can Democracy be? Can there be illiberal democracy of sorts?"
Illiberal,
because the democracy.
Liberal in the economic sense.
Liberal in the individual freedom sense.
Okay.
And as well, of course, individual freedom would essentially incorporate the idea of private property and access to your productive resources.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that was us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that was it. Thank you all.
Comment, like, share.
Yeah. Comment, share, subscribe.
Yeah.
Thanks
Subscribe,
for listening, guys.
To the Moral Economy podcast.
Always enjoy talking to you and hearing your feedback.
Yeah. Please comment.
Really
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Cheers.
We're sick and tired of all your lies, your unwillingness to compromise. So we'll take it into our own hands. Educate ourselves and take a stand. We're gonna occupy your street, your house, your bank accounts, your everything, yes, everything. Oh, we're here to occupy. I know we feel it's time we occupy. Hey, yeah. I reckon it's a revolution. When it's all